We're going to get started. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. This is really exciting to see all of you on Zoom and give our interns a chance to talk a little bit about our school garden project. So my name is Mackenzie Fox Potter. I work for the Kentucky Horticulture Council, and we are one of the founding members of the Kentucky Farm to School Network. We have been working with the University of Kentucky Department of Nutrition and Dietetics for about a year and a half on this school garden project that kind of culminating right now to the end of the project. And we've had a couple interns that have been working with us and working with the schools individually to help them implement these gardens. And they're here today to share their experiences with you and share some of the lessons that we learned. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves real quick before we get started. So, Christina, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thank you, Mackenzie. My name's Christina Wilson, and I graduated this semester with a bachelor's in dietetics at the University of Kentucky, and I'm going on to get my graduate degree there in nutrition and food systems.
Thanks, Christina. Mackenzie, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Starnes. I am also attending the University of Kentucky. I'm a sophomore student and a dietetics major as well.
And last but certainly not least, our intern that's been with us for the longest out of any of them, Nick Gunn. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? My name is Nick Gunn. I've been working for the Kentucky Horticulture Council for a year now. I am a senior dietetics student and also a sustainable agriculture minor. And I look forward to helping you all out on your journey.
Great, thanks, Nick. And we have a couple other interns that were not able to be here with us today, or ones that have gone on and graduated that I just want to acknowledge real quick, including Courtney Rogers, who's one of our undergraduate interns that is on a trip in Italy right now. JB Pitts, who is another one of our interns that graduated last year, and he's working at a garden in Frankfurt. Katie Pickford is one of our graduate interns that graduated this year, and she's moved on to working at a farm. And then Kendra Onorsak is one of the supervisors at UK that has kind of overseen a lot of the research pieces of this project. Okay, can you go to the next slide, Nick? And for those of you that are just joining us, feel free to put your name and where you're from in the chat. We'd love to get an idea of where everybody is coming from. So to give you guys a kind of overview today of our presentation that you're going to hear about, we are going to start with talking generally about school gardens and the benefits of gardening. We'll then get into the planning phase of school gardens. So thinking small and dreaming big, and you'll get to hear about what that means in a little bit. We'll then talk about selecting a garden site and preparing that site, planting, maintenance, and get into a little bit about growing year round. And then we have a variety of resources that we're going to share with you, including the Kentucky Ready, Set, Grow curriculum. And real quick, before I go on to the next slide, I just wanted to give a couple of logistical reminders because we are on a virtual call. And I think most people are familiar with this at this point because we've all been doing this for a couple of years. But just a reminder, please keep yourself on mute, at least for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions, just go ahead and stick them in the chat. At the end, we will open it up for questions and invite folks to come off mute and ask them through the camera if they'd like to, or if you'd prefer to put them in the chat, that's totally fine also. We are recording this presentation, so if you don't want your image to be in the recording, feel free to turn your video off. I don't think that anybody's pictures except the presenters will be in the recording, but I can't guarantee that because Zoom sometimes has a mind of its own. But if you definitely don't want your image in the recording, just go ahead and turn your video off. And then tomorrow you will be receiving the recording, which will be on YouTube. We're going to send you the PowerPoint that we're presenting today and all the resources that we're going to talk about. Next slide. So we're going to go ahead and do a poll, which I'm going to launch here. So we want to know what your all's experiences are with school gardens. So we would like to know if you've ever worked with school gardens. So the answers are yes, currently, yes, in the past, or no, not at all. And we'll wait a little while for everybody to answer before sharing the results. And then you all should be able to see it once I do that. All right. Still got a couple answers coming in. It's a pretty even distribution. Actually, right now it's perfectly even. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results with you all so you can see. So it's pretty interesting that actually it's 1/3 for each of our answers. That's very interesting to me, mathematic wise. But so it looks like about 2/3 of you have worked in the past with school gardens or are currently working with school gardens, and then about 1/3 of you have not worked with school gardens at all. So thank you very much for answering that. We just wanted to get an idea of where you all were at, um, so that we knew and so that the rest of the group knew as well. And before we get started into the content, I just wanted to add that the experiences that we have guided us in making this presentation today. So all of the content that we're going to present is based on resources that we have found or the experiences that we've had. But with that said, I know that there's a lot of people that have worked in school gardens for a really long time, some of which may be on this call today. So if you have little tips or tricks as we're presenting that you don't hear us talking about, feel free to drop those in the chats for your other friends that are here on the call today that might be interested in tips and tricks or just generally anything that you've learned from your school gardens. Please feel free to share that in the chat. Next slide. So really quickly, I wanted to kind of give you guys an introduction into the Kentucky Farm to School Network, because that is the group that kind of started this project. So the network is a group of individuals, organizations, and advocates of farm to school in the state of Kentucky. We work together to promote farm to school across the state in a variety of different ways through special media, through different programs, and through a couple other things that I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But our overall vision is that farm to school is foundational to the health and development of Kentucky communities, farms, and schools. And we believe that every student should be connected to and nourished by Kentucky farmers. And there's a little bit more information there about our mission, but if you're interested in being involved with the network, I will put in the chat here in a moment our website and our Facebook page, and would invite you to engage with us that way. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have a variety of initiatives and programs that we work on. We are a group of at least 35 to 40 individuals who consistently are participating and helping with the program. So it's really great because it provides a way for us to work on farm to school issues on a broad scale and not be doing it all by ourselves, which is kind of the point of the network. So some of the programs that we've done or are currently doing include the Kentucky Farm to School Challenge, our Farm to School Month celebrations. Last year we did these cute little signs, which some of you may have received, that say for the farmers that put them up, it says, "This farm feeds Kentucky kids." And for the schools that display them, their sign says, "This school supports Kentucky farmers." And then we have had a variety of mini grants that we've done in the past 2 years, including a taste testing mini grant where students get to taste Kentucky grown produce, and our school garden mini grants, which is the project that we're going to talk about today. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Christina that is going to get us started in the benefits of school gardens and get into the content of today's presentation. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, sounds good. Hope everybody can hear me okay. Yeah, let's get started into the content talking about school gardens. So school gardens are a special addition to your school property. They're great because they come in a variety of ways and don't have to be a certain way. A school garden might be a few raised beds or an indoor a hydroponic tower, or a whole field of flowers and pumpkins. Depending on the school's goals, a variety of plants can be grown in the gardens. They may be a focus on flowers, perennial plants, or even aromatic plants, but regardless, school gardens are a space for students to grow inside and outside of the classroom. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the benefits of school gardens. Considering you've all decided to come to this workshop today, you may already be aware that or not surprised that there's a lot of benefits to school gardens. Research shows school gardens have and leave a positive impact on student achievement and behavior. It has been seen that young children convey emotions, share and communicate thoughts, and build skills to be used throughout life when carrying out garden activities. It's been found that students gain appreciation and respect for nature that lasts a lifetime. Students and young children that participate in gardening significantly increase their science achievement scores. And lastly, children and students who engage in gardening have an increased interest in eating fruits and vegetables. It's been shown they have improved attitudes towards specific fruits and vegetables as well. All right, next slide. And I think we're going to do another poll here. So that should come up on your screen soon. So the question is, what do you foresee as being your biggest challenge with starting a school garden? Your options are funding, administrative support, time, maintenance, connection to education standards, or student interest. Give it a few more seconds here. The reality is that it's going to be different for every school and location. As we had kind of a split down at the beginning of the poll with experience here, some people may have more needs than others. So we'll talk about planning here. And like we said, this is a think small and dream big kind of attitude. The planning process can be broken up into a few different sections. And for this, we're focusing on a few. As you'll see in the Kentucky Ready, Set, Grow copy, creating a support network or building a team is really important and worth the effort for a successful school garden. Think about who you want to be involved, just the students, teachers and other faculty, or the community as a whole. The more support you can garner, the better, but know that may take time to get everyone on board. Once you know who you want to be involved or have an idea of what tasks you want them to carry out and what time commitment you can expect from them. Also knowing how much help you will have can help you determine the size and goals for your garden. Next slide. All right, so after you're planning everything, another consideration is what do you do with the produce? This is maybe one of the fun things to think about. So another part of the planning process is planning out what you're going to grow in your garden. How do you expect to link the garden to the school curriculum? While there are many ways to do this, we advise to keep it simple the first year. Think about the main subject that you can connect to the garden and see how it goes with your students. Do you plan to do taste tests with what you grow? Do you hope to just grow enough for one class, or do you hope to supply a cafeteria with food? If the latter, be sure to make plans with your food service director. If you think you will be growing a lot of produce, then you can potentially make plans to donate it or to support the local food community. And of course, there's always an option to compost excess produce. This is a great way to not lose any energy or nutrients from your system. And this is a very sustainable way to keep your soil healthy over the years. Great, next slide. All right, so I know from the last poll we did, funding was a big consideration for a lot of the people at this workshop. So let's talk about some of the budgeting and funding sources available. One other key part of the planning process is determining a budget and identifying your funding sources. Unfortunately, money doesn't grow on trees. Otherwise, there'd be many more school gardens. Needless to say, money can seem like a barrier or even an overwhelming factor when getting a school garden started. However, there are a lot of resources out there to help support or jumpstart school gardens. Google can definitely be your best friend when it comes to looking for larger funding opportunities, but here are a few reputable sources we know about. And additionally, don't forget to consider your community for funding support. You could create a booster club. You could ask for donations from your community, whether that be just time, monetary, or even a trade, such as someone who could just come and work. Or of course, there is the option for crowdfunding. There are a lot of fundraisers you can do for small gardens, plant sales, garden decorations. And we also want to remind you, a school garden doesn't need to start out with all the bells and whistles. A simple start and then work to increase the school garden budget over time. Next slide. So one thing we like to do is learn from what we've done last year. And so we have a best practice slide to talk about through all of our sections for things we've learned and improved on. So here are a few things we've learned to think are the best things to remember to focus on when getting your school garden started. Start small. Just as we've all been saying, think small and dream big, it really is easy to get overwhelmed or have too many things going on at the beginning. Try to be realistic as possible and use your energy to hone a few skills or take excellent care of a few plants. With each new year, season, semester, quarter, or whatever your school has, gradually add in new pieces, people, system, or plants. School garden requires planning. Most importantly, try to build a team or core group who will see out the process of planning, building, and maintaining the garden. As mentioned before, be sure to communicate with school maintenance in terms of logistics, care, and resources and responsibility. For example, communicating with the maintenance about the garden plans may ensure your garden space doesn't get mowed over, or that the maintenance team can easily fit their equipment around raised garden beds. Through this experience, we have learned it is best to try to engage your students in the planning process, as it makes them feel important and pushes them to see the garden through. However, because they may not know the right place to start, you may need to give them a few examples or ideas. Lastly, management and organization is really important for a long-lasting garden. Before you start, we can't stress this enough. Know who is in charge of managing your garden and try to keep it organized and plan through the process as much as possible, so you can look back on it and continue to make improvements to your garden. And of course, most school gardens aren't completely free. We aren't saying you can't be thrifty. However, having some funds at the initial start is a great way to get started with study materials, tools, and soil if you need it. All right, Mackenzie, I think you're next.
Okay, so starting to get into the nitty-gritty of planning your garden site, you're going to want to think about what garden you actually want to build. So indoor gardens are one of the simplest type of school gardens. They're most often done by placing plants in front of a bright windowsill. Leaf and root vegetables like herbs do require a good bit of sunlight, so you're going to want to make sure that you choose your brightest windows in your classrooms and school building. If possible, choose windows that face the south and the west for optimal sunlight. If you need to supplement the natural sunlight, grow lights are an effective way to use to grow your indoor crops. They're a great option because they allow you to control the amount of light that your plant will receive, and they can also allow you to expand your crop variety to include fruits like tomatoes and strawberries. The other big type of garden that we're looking at is going to be a traditional outdoor garden, which is going to be planted in the ground of a schoolyard. These are great for encouraging root growth, and the garden can always soak in the extra moisture very easily. However, these are not the only option for outdoor gardens, and depending on the quality of your soil, they may not be the best option. Raised garden beds are another one that are commonly used by schools, and these differ from in-ground gardens because they use frames to create a more permanent structure. These frames can be made using materials like recycled plastic lumber, rot-resistant wood, or even concrete blocks. Framed raised beds are more expensive than directly planting in the ground, but they do offer a lot of benefits. They're well-defined and can help differentiate between a garden and pathway. which can be something that's very useful with younger students. Additionally, they can help minimize pest issues, weeds, and drainage problems, which will make the maintenance a lot easier. Another option is a container garden, which is going to be commonly using clay, plastic pots, wooden barrels, or buckets. These are similar to other outdoor garden types in terms of sun exposure, soil quality, and nutrients, but it is important to keep in mind that container gardens tend to dry out quicker than in-ground gardens. Next slide. So now you're going to want to start thinking about what your garden needs to thrive. In terms of sunlight, if you're planting a flower, vegetable, or herb garden, your plants are most likely going to need to have full sunlight for about 6 hours a day, which is a lot. So you want to determine what areas of the garden site receive the most sunlight. You can even get your students engaged by monitoring the area during different times of the day and the year to see how much sun it receives. Shadier areas can be used for gathering spaces or for more shade-tolerant plants. Soil testing. Good soil is essential for a successful garden. You'll need a nutrient-rich soil with good texture and organic matter. To have your soil tested, identify which extension office works in your county. The Kentucky Ready Site Grow website has information on finding your extension office and how you can gather your soil sample to take in. You should try to sample areas in the garden site where plants are growing. Do not sample compost areas, areas under the drip line of trees, or ones close to the street. When deciding on the size of your garden, it's always a good idea to start with something small that you know you can accomplish. This way you will avoid overshooting and it allows for expansion as your program grows. You can have your students help you measure the parameters of the site, including notes of pathways, fencing, water sources, and shaded areas. Once you have the area defined, you can begin sketches of the garden site. A storage shed should be put in an accessible location for cleaning, organizing, and protecting tools and equipment. If you're investing in expensive tools, you want to ensure that they're kept safe and they'll be usable for years to come. Moving on to plant protection, not all organisms are necessarily bad for your garden. Pest predators like ladybugs, wasps, lacewings, and birds can all help to keep your garden pest-free from the type of pests that you don't want to have. Consider adding a fountain or a water source that can help attract birds. Perennial plants are also a great addition as they provide year-round habitats for beneficial organisms. To manage pests, make sure that you're removing any dead or infected plant material which can harbor diseases and pests. You may also want to install fabric covers or fences to keep out larger pests if that may be an issue for your garden. Moving on to maintenance and summer extension, your maintenance team is going to be absolutely key to ensuring your garden succeeds. We can't say this enough. If you don't have a strong support system, you will find it really hard to keep your garden going. You should aim to have a group of people that will consistently help to maintain the garden, whether that be a summer club, a volunteer group, or a team of faculty. You can also enlist the help of service organizations such as FFA, 4-H, Scouts, and even church youth groups. You will want to make sure that you have a detailed schedule to ensure that there's always someone there to take care of the garden and people know when they're expected. Having a strong network of support is vital to your garden's success. Next slide. So once you've actually decided on where you're putting your garden, you can begin preparations for the area. Once you've completed soil testing as well, you'll need to identify what you need to add to your soil to achieve the desired quality. Just like us, plants require certain nutrients in order to be healthy and grow. The big three for plants are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These elements play a role in plant growth and development, as well as disease resistance. Since plants acquire the majority of their nutrients from the soil, it's important that your soil contains these essential elements. There are many different types of fertilizers available, and each type could be beneficial to your garden depending on what you specifically need. Look at product labels to see which nutrients are in the highest concentrations of the fertilizers you're looking at. We do recommend that you use a mild fertilizer diluted for seedlings, or simply use a seed starting soil mix that already contains fertilizer if you're doing seeds. Keep in mind that while fertilizer is really important for plant growth, too much can be a bad thing. Only apply the amount that you need, as excess fertilizer can actually contribute to plant diseases. Also, as plants grow, they will deplete the nutrients in the soil, meaning that fertilizing needs to be repeated. You should constantly monitor nutrient levels to ensure that your soil is healthy, and therefore your plants will be too. Compost piles are made up of decomposing garden waste and organic materials high in carbon and nitrogen. As they break down into smaller particles with the help of decomposers like earthworms and bacteria, they release nutrients back into the soil. Compost can be a great tool to incorporate into your soil and increase its nutrient content. There are many different ways to create your own compost pile or bin, and depending on your resources and needs, it may not all look the same for everyone. The Kentucky Ready Set Grow website, again, has some great resources on starting your compost pile if you are interested. And next slide. Once you have actually decided on the type of garden that you want to create, you can begin to prepare it. For raised beds, you want to begin by building a strong and sturdy frame. Additionally, raking the top surface of the soil will help increase water retention and decrease soil erosion. If installing in-ground beds, you will want to begin by tilling the ground to loosen up the soil and remove weeds. This can be done by hand or using shovels and digging forks or with a tiller. If you're concerned with the nutrient content of your soil, you can also incorporate compost into your soil while you're tilling. Stakes and string can be used to map out where the beds will be placed. Remember to keep your beds narrow enough, though, that kids can reach into the middle without having to step into the bed. And the next slide. So again, these are just some of the best practices that we have. Just to summarize some of the key points that we've learned, raised beds are a really great design for a small school garden. Be mindful of their size. Don't make them too wide so that your students can't reach into the middle or the other side. They're a great way to keep students and maintenance from walking on the plants. They can also be good protection because a raised bed may keep some plants slightly protected from heavy downpour, puddles, or flooding. However, we advise that you build or invest in strong materials so that your raised beds will last for many years. Also a hint, make sure that your raised beds are the appropriate depth and won't impede plant growth or root growth. Be sure to prep or amend your soil before you're planting things straight into the ground. From our experiences, it's important for plant longevity. They need appropriate nutrients. And unfortunately, we don't have the best soil in Kentucky. We do have a lot of clay, which plants don't love. So again, it is really, really important to have your soil tested to see what you do need to add in there. And I will hand it over to Nick from here.
All right. How's it going, everyone? I'm going to start talking about planting. So the first step to planting is deciding what your goals are for your garden. Take into account both short and long-term goals. So a question to ask is, what kind of plants make sense for your garden? Maybe you have a lot of space and garden knowledge and feel comfortable with growing a more difficult crop, or maybe you're a beginner and need to start with herbs or tomatoes. So the next question to consider is how much you want to harvest and when. So different plants thrive during different seasons. For example, potatoes need to be planted in April, while turnips need to be planted in mid-August. So for example, West Jasmine Middle School is a great example of proper for their needs. They decided to create a sensory garden that would include herbs, fruits, and vegetables that stimulate students' sense of taste, smell, touch, sight, and sound. They picked plants that would grow quickly so students could enjoy it sooner. And if you want a great resource of when to plant and harvest, page 45 of the Ready, Set, Grow guide has a Kentucky focused chart with this information. This resource also included some great vegetables for beginners to grow, such as listed above here, cherry tomatoes, banana peppers, hot peppers, bush beans, squash, and zucchini. So next, oh, did I go backwards? I'm sorry. Okay, so the next thing to know is your grow zone. So knowing what plants grow well in Kentucky, as well as your specific region of Kentucky, will set you up for success. This chart from the USDA shows the average extreme minimum temperatures for each county. You can see in the chart that most of the state falls in the middle zone, but some of Western Kentucky falls in the higher temperature zone. This is important when considering planting because extreme temperatures can kill plants off. So selecting appropriate crops will help your garden thrive. Planting seeds indoors to bypass extreme cold temperatures is a great way to help less hardy plants survive and extend your growing season. So next we have planting considerations. So many factors go into a successful garden. Root depth, plant support, and potential pests are all great topics to look into before planting even begins. When designing your garden, the root depth of each plant, needs to be taken into account. Lettuce, kale, and onions are shallow rooted plants, while tomatoes, asparagus, and pumpkins have deeper roots. Make sure the area you are planting in has adequate space for healthy plants. Another consideration is plant support. Plants that climb will need proper reinforcements, such as like a tomato cage is a good example. Most fruitful, the last big consideration is pests. Sorry, holes in leaves or damage to plants is evidence of a potential pest. And the first step towards a solution is to identify what it is. This is a great opportunity for students to investigate and help the success of the garden. Once the pest has been identified, you can make a plan of action to help solve you. So now I have some best practices for planning. A few things that we learned that could be helpful. So if you're nervous about getting people to help maintain the garden, create or plan a community work day to engage the community and parents, share ideas, and help to get the garden established and in the ground. So we need to really be conscious of the plants we pick to grow and where you choose to grow them. Like Mackenzie was saying, indoors or outdoors, the amount of sun involved, soil depth, and then the amount of water that they need. So remember to try to plan for the future. While you can't anticipate everything by living in certain areas of Kentucky, you can guess or assume you will get some extreme weather like we talked about in Western Kentucky. So just think of how this could impact your plants and how you can minimize damage. So wind, open spaces, you can block or protect through various means. Low flood zones and other issues such as that. So a good idea is to start with easy plants. We like to be ambitious, and growing plants is so much fun. However, try to stick to the basics the first or the second year. Pick fruits, vegetables, and flowers that are relatively easy to care for and grow. Because keep in mind, we do want the kids to be involved, so it shouldn't be super difficult. But we do have to anticipate some losses, especially early in the process. And it's important to share this with the students as it is part of life and think about the problems and how they can solve them. Just think about what went wrong and how you could do better next year. Make sure that if you're worried about this, and similarly your students will be too, try to provide them with projects in the middle to keep them excited until the plants are ready, or pick vegetables or fruit with short short grow times, such as radishes, some salad greens, microgreens grow in around about a week, and then summer squash is another good option. Okay, I'm gonna turn it back. Sorry. Okay, so for maintenance, planning for the maintenance of your garden is a very important step for ensuring all the work that has been put into the garden survives over the summer. So communicating with not only the parents, the students, but with the school's maintenance team is important. Letting the maintenance team know who will be on the property, where to mow, and what not to mow is a good step to ensuring a smooth transition into the summer months. Involving the community is also a great way to spread the reach of the school garden, such as extension agents, other teachers or staff, local master gardeners, and other community members who may be interested in helping to support the garden. Consider how you may reach them through social media, word of mouth, or like a school weekly newsletter. So to plan for the summer months, there are a lot of options you can consider. Is there a garden club at your school or summer school programming that could be involved in maintaining the garden? If not, consider planning a summer garden club that could meet once a week or rotate students to take care of the garden. Spreading out the work and the commitment to the garden with the community is a good practice to reach as many students as possible and involvement with students. So, like we brushed over a little bit, different plants require different levels of maintenance. So over the summer months, we know that the summer can be bright, sunny, and hot. There are also other weather considerations such as storms that we can get around August. All of these considerations to make when deciding what plants to grow in your summer or in your garden. Sorry. Some plants may need to be misted or watered daily. Some may thrive in direct sunlight while others may brown and burn with too much sun. So we have cherry tomatoes that need to be harvested very frequently. The second picture here, it's, as you can see, it's really difficult to tell what's an onion and what's a weed. Third, right here, we have some plants that are more prone to disease or pest pressure. And then we have frequent plant water, especially in the hot summer months. And we discussed earlier, but herbs require less maintenance and are a great beginner plant. So regarding what types of plants to grow in your region and the scope of your garden project is a lot to consider. There are many resources at the end of this presentation to help with those decisions. Like we stated earlier, reaching out to extension offices as well as community members is a great place to start. So going on to maintenance challenges. I figure we assume this, but one of the biggest challenges to maintaining a garden over the summer is just underestimating the amount of work and upkeep a school garden needs, especially depending on how large you decide to make it. This is something that each school may face differently. So is there a lack of volunteers, a lack of programming? Is there support within the school faculty? Are there physical challenges to the region? Harsh weather conditions, the sun, poor soil? Is there a water source close by? All of these barriers are considerations to make during the planning stage, and involving the support of faculty and members of the community to help address these challenges could be a big help. So here we have best practices for maintenance. So next to planning, we might argue that maintenance is the most important thing. So here are a few tips we have to succeed and make sure your school garden is sustainable over time. I recommend creating a physical sign-up system to help with summer maintenance. This can be teachers or parent-student duos, just making sure to get as many people involved as we can. Forming partnerships with the broader community is important for garnishing support and also other materials, such as I know at West Jessamine High School, they had a former student come and till their ground for them. So easily romanticize. Know that when you plan to undertake a school garden, it will require more energy and time on your part, like weeding afterward. So make plans for harvest so that the food doesn't go to waste, especially during the summer. Have designated days for family pickup or have a plan in place to donate. And lastly, we found out kids get tired or bored of pruning and weeding quickly. So if you can't make a game out of pruning, expect to be doing a lot of weeding yourself.
Okay, so moving on to year-round gardening. One of the biggest complaints or challenges that we face with school gardens is that most of the magic happens during the summer. So we want to propose a few ways you can keep students engaged with gardening or growing at all times of the year. You can create or use a school garden calendar. These actually already exist and can give you an idea of what to do in slow months. Plant and harvest early, late, or use cover crops. Save your seeds in the fall and prepare the garden for winter. You can actually engage the students by planning the next season with them. This allows them to do something a little bit more hands-on, and they get to do something that involves the garden and make decisions of that. You can prepare the garden in the spring by amending your soil. Again, you want to make sure that soil is really, really good so that your plants are going to be nice and healthy. And you can carry out projects or parts of the curriculum with things that you save from the season. For example, you can use canning or drying as a technique to preserve some of the food items that you may harvest. Next slide. So what about growing all year? We are lucky to have a decently long growing season here in Kentucky, and listed here are a few veggies which can be grown outside of the traditional summer season, and also a few things that can be grown inside with the use of like a hydroponic system or microgreen system. We have things like sugar snap peas, kale, arugula, garlic, onion, other bulb type plants, as well as cover crops. And next slide. Again, with the best practices here, hydroponic systems are super, super cool, and they will enable you to grow things in the year, all year round. However, from some of the schools that we've worked with, they do have a few tips for you if you choose to pursue an indoor growing system. These hydroponic systems can be pretty tricky. So the easiest things to grow are going to be greens like lettuce or herbs. Be sure that you have a safe space to keep the system because, as we all know, they are not cheap, and you do not want to waste all that money if you do invest in a hydroponic system. Also, it does help to know someone like an extension agent who can help provide maintenance if it does break down, because again, you don't want to be throwing all that money away if it does have a little bit of an issue with the system. Lastly, we know that most of you are probably masters with time management by this point, but we do hear from a lot of the schools that we work with to take advantage of your least busy times so that you can plan for the coming season.
All right, next slide. All right, so we're coming close to the end of our presentation, so I know that's a lot of information. We did discuss planning a school garden and focusing on how to build that with your community, students, and team. Selecting a garden site, preparing it. We discussed planting, the maintenance, and growing it all year round. So this is going to be a great resource here. All of these listed have a wealth of information that's been proven with science and research, as well as working with students. So we'd like to share these with you. Some of these detail activities and lesson plans that are created that take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour that you can use as ideas and adapt to your own plans. And they're great resources, so be sure to check those out. And this video will be recorded so you can go back and have this information. All right, next slide. I think we're going to wrap up this presentation with another poll. So what kind of support from the Kentucky Farm to School Network would be the most helpful to starting your school garden? And this is just for us to kind of help build and create more information that's helpful to the educators of Kentucky. We'll give it a few more seconds here. See if anybody else wants to chime in with any feedback that you could give us on what would be most helpful to you to starting your garden in the future. Okay, that looks good. All right, so we can see there's a lot of ways that we can help support you with videos and future technical assistance. All right, next slide, Nick. All right, I think we'll open it up and try to address the chat and see if there's any questions you all may have. And thank you for coming today. And I hope you're excited to kind of plan to start your garden as well as bring some questions we may help you with.
All right, thanks, Christina, Mackenzie, and Nick. I am going to read some of the questions in the chat. And then if anybody has questions, feel free to come off mute and ask those questions actually yourself. So we did have one question about fertilizer, specifically like, is fertilizer safe for kids' hands to be in the garden? And I put in the chat that what we're seeing most schools do is using compost, which is a sustainable and safe practice. Personally, I would stay away from chemical fertilizers in the school garden and stick more with the organic fertilizers. But in general, you're not going to want the kids to be the ones that are applying the fertilizer, even if you're using organic fertilizers. Another question we had, which I'll open this up to Christina, Mackenzie, and Nick, because they're the ones that have spent a lot of time with our school garden grantees, is what would you say is the biggest ingredient for success in a school garden?
I think honestly, just like we were talking about, a support system, and then like a very thorough schedule of like when you're gonna plant and when you expect to harvest. Will people be there?
I agree. I think that's great to have having like the biggest support network you can. Another really good tip is to involve the students in every part of the process, even if that's just carrying items from your shed to the garden. You'll be surprised to see how they each find a different thing they enjoy doing. And by involving them through everything, they contribute to the work. So I think having a large community support and then involving the students to do a lot of the work, because you got a big group of them when you're working, is a great tool.
Yeah, I would just have to agree the same exact thing. Having that support system is going to be key to having a successful garden. It's not an easy thing at all to do for just one person. So it really is essential to have a team of people, a team of students, parents, volunteers, community members. We've been doing a few events where we try to get community outreach into the garden, get the community excited about your garden, get them wanting to come and help out. And that's really the best way to have that support network and to just get everyone involved so that you're not doing it all alone.
Yeah, thanks, Mackenzie. And I think too that when you involve the community and all the different teachers and staff at the school, that helps them feel like they're part of the garden and take some ownership over it, so that when push comes to shove and it's the middle of summer and 95 degrees outside, you're not the only one that's out there picking weeds or watering the garden, because they'll feel a little bit more buy-in. And I would just echo what all three of our interns said today. I would also just reiterate the importance of starting small. We saw with some of our grantees, they got really excited, and I've done this many times before, where I planted way too much and did not have the capacity to be able to be maintaining and harvesting that. And we've seen that in some of our school gardens as well. So you have to just like stop for a second and think about, okay, what can I really manage this summer? Or can I start with one small thing, or like a couple raised beds? And then as you start to gain that support from the different community members and the staff, then start to think about expanding and maybe giving, as you expand, maybe there are certain pieces that different staff members are responsible for. So I don't
I'd
see.
like to add something really
Christina.
quickly. Getting to know your community is another great way to get started. Do you know someone with a bobcat? Do you know someone with a saw that may need to take a tree down for you? Even if they don't know about gardening, if they have something and they'd like to contribute that could be so valuable. So just kind of reaching out to see different ways members of the community or parents could help would be great.
Yeah, that's a great point. At one of our schools in Berea, Kingston Elementary, they actually had a father that brought them the grass clippings every single week when he mowed, and they used that as kind of the mulch to keep the weeds down in parts of their garden. So that's a great point to be thinking about who do you know in your community and what sort of resources can they provide to you. And it might be, not something that you generally think of. It could be something like bringing grass clippings. So thanks for adding that, Christina. Does anybody have any questions that they want to come off mute for or would like to put in the chat? Go ahead and do that. I'll pause here for a moment to see if anybody has any questions.
This is Jennifer from Kentucky Ag and Environment in the Classroom. I guess one thing that I just thought I should note is the Kentucky Farm Bureau holds their regional teacher workshops in June, and at the Louisville and Lexington events, which is the third week in June, I believe, they're going to have a national award-winning teacher. He teaches at Simons Middle School in Fleming County. They have an extensive farm program. They do aquaponics, they have bees, they have an orchard. I think they do several other things. But anyway, he's going to be presenting at those two workshops in Louisville and Lexington. So if people want to know more, that could be a good workshop to attend.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, for adding that. And I just put in the chat the link to register for that workshop, and I will put Teach Kentucky Ag's general website for the different workshops that they host or participate in. But there are so many great resources out there that are ready to help you, whether that's people that are ready to help you or resources like websites. The Kentucky Ready, Set, Grow curriculum, as we've mentioned many times, is a great resource, and it's a great place to start when you're thinking about your school garden. Jennifer works with Kentucky Ag and Environment in the Classroom and is they're the creators of the Kentucky Ready, Set, Grow website and curriculum. So be sure to check out not only the Ready, Set, Grow curriculum, but also the Teach Kentucky Ag website, because there's tons of great resources on there. Lots of different lessons, even outside of just like horticultural production, but also thinking about, cows and pigs and chickens and dairy. They span all aspects of agriculture. Okay, any other questions? I see in the chat, Michelle gave us some tips about square foot gardening. So thanks for that, Michelle. All right, well, with that, I want to thank you all again for being here. As I mentioned before, tomorrow we will send out an email with the recording and all of the resources that we talked about today. I will make sure to include the website for the Kentucky Farm Bureau Educator Workshops that are happening next month, as well as some of the resources that Kentucky Ag and Environment in the Classroom provides. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. You all have my email. I sent an email earlier today to everybody. So we're more than happy to help in whatever way we can. And we'd love to see school gardens start popping up all across Kentucky. So thanks everybody for being here.